Hey besties, it is 9 a.m. And I've been awake since 3 because my sleep schedule's all out of whack. But I need to make a video because it's Wednesday and the video needs to come out tomorrow and I have no video planned. It's too early to do an update video, so what we're going to do, we're going to talk about the movie The Fast and the Furious, the first one, the one that came out in 2001, because I recently watched it and I have some qualms. I have some issues with the movie. So we're just going to talk about it. This video is not well put together, and if you like the movie, this video is not going to be for you, okay? Because I'm going to talk about all the reasons I didn't like the movie, which are a lot. Because I did not like the movie. I thought it was bad. Even though apparently a lot of people seem to like it. A lot of people think it's a really good movie. And I don't understand that. And I'm going to be talking about it because it's been weighing heavily on my mind ever since I've seen it. And I am also not interested really in trying to find a reason why this is a good movie. Because the movie can just be bad. I'm going to make a video about that eventually, about how you can like things that are bad. But just for the sake of this video, just understand that I fully believe that you can like it and it could also be bad. You can fully enjoy the experience of watching it while it also being a bad piece of media. Okay? Okay. I didn't go into this movie, wanting to dislike it. Okay, I've been to many Universal Studios theme parks. I've been on that Fast and Furious supercharged ride with the 3D glasses many a times, okay? I want to enjoy Fast and Furious. I love stupid movies. I love them so much. One of my favorite movies is Cats, 2019, okay? So I'm not trying to come in here thinking that I'm better than any of you, okay? I like bad movies, but this movie was just not enjoyable because it didn't make any sense. There are bad movies, and then there's this, which just, I didn't understand or comprehend or really like in the slightest. There are parts of it that were okay, but the movie as a whole was, bad. It wasn't even so bad that I liked it, which was even more disappointing because I can like things that are bad. Okay, but let's just talk about the movie. If you've never seen it, you don't need to. It's not good. And I've never seen any of the other movies. I just watched this first movie, and I fully believe that, maybe it would be better as, a prequel or a startup to, the rest of the series, but I am fully within my right to believe that movies should be able to stand alone. You should be able to just watch one movie and enjoy it and understand it. This movie does not feel like a movie, though. It feels like the pilot episode to, a TV series. It feels like they introduced a lot of things that didn't go anywhere. And, especially since this was the first movie, there should be no expectation that this was going to turn into this giant 9-movie series that you needed to introduce all these plot elements for, right? You should just had one strong cohesive story, and then if that does well, then you make more movies. But this already felt like they went into it knowing that they were going to get John Cena and The Rock to shoot airplanes in space or whatever the new movies are about, okay? And I didn't like that because it didn't feel like the movie was meant to just be a movie. It felt like an investment into something bigger, and I didn't want to make that investment. I just wanted to watch a fun, stupid movie. I also just might not be the target audience for it. The movie was very much clearly for straight men, straight cishet men, and that I am not. So maybe it would be enjoyable if I was just somebody else, but I don't think it was for me. There was a lot of car lingo that was just not explained, and it was just to sort of assume that you knew and understood what torque was, and I don't understand. I didn't understand a single car term that they used in that movie. They had a lot of very specific terms for specific cars, and torque was the only piece that I could somewhat pick up because I've heard the word torque before. Every other word, though, no. Nas, only a little bit because I played Choices. What's a word that means I've devoted a lot of time and energy towards it, but I do not like it? I have a love-hate relationship with Choices, but there's a story in there which you join a gang, a street racing gang, and one of the characters gets blown up by Nas. So I know that I'm cool, but that's the extent of my car knowledge. So a lot of this movie just truly went over my head, and I didn't understand it. And I felt like maybe the point of the movie was not to appeal to a wide mass audience, and that's fine, but that just was not clear. But especially since Fast and Furious seems to be a very middle America action movie franchise now. Maybe it was different when it started, though. Maybe it just truly wasn't for me. Because they're, like, you would think, oh, you want just anybody to be able to watch it, understand it, enjoy this movie. Maybe we explain these terms. But they never did. So I didn't understand any of what they were talking about. So that's already one reason I didn't like the movie. Another reason I didn't like the movie is because they didn't explain any other part of the plot. If you're a fan of the Try Guys, the Try Guys has a podcast called Guilty Pleasures with Zach from the Try Guys. They did a whole episode about Fast and Furious, this first movie that I'm talking about, and how much they all loved it. And I could not relate to a single thing they said because it didn't make any sense. Because this movie doesn't make any sense to me. But they even said that themselves, that, like, nothing was really, like, fully developed, specifically between the relationships between the characters. Okay, I don't know a single person's name in this movie. There's the cop, who's the main character, who we don't understand as a cop until, like, maybe 20 or 30 minutes in. So in the first, like, 10 minutes, I had no idea what was going on. And you really need to make the first beginning of the movie, like, attention-grabbing and interesting so that people want to watch the rest of the movie. But they had already lost me by the time that they sort of reveal that white boy's a cop. Because it's like, the movie starts on this, like, chase. I truly still don't really know what's going on. I think it was showing cars jacking a truck. But that was unclear. Because it was the first scene of the movie. But then you see this white boy at this diner, maybe, and he's flirting with this waitress. And then it's clear that this waitress has some sort of relationship to Vin Diesel. But I truly did not understand their relationship until we got to, like, the party scene at the end of, like, Act 1. When she says, oh, he's my brother. For the first beginning part of the movie, I thought they might have been dating. Because it just was not clear. I could not tell. I could tell that they had some sort of very strong and important relationship, and that the cop was sort of encroaching on that. But it was not clear what that relationship was, because nothing was explained in the movie. And then, in this beginning scene in which he is flirting with the waitress, who I still don't know her name, because they said a lot of names in the movie, but they never had a moment in which they were like, this is this guy. Let me introduce you to everybody. There was never that moment, or if there was, I completely forgot about it because there's so many characters in this movie. And it's not like even an ensemble movie. There's clearly main characters. It's Vin Diesel and the cop. This movie would have been better if it was a romance, because it truly is written like a romance. Like Vin Diesel and the cop, you know, enemies to lovers, but like it wasn't, because no homo, of course. There's so many characters that it feels like it should be an ensemble movie, but it's like not. There's very clearly main characters, but then why then are there so many named characters that it's so hard to like figure out who is who? But Vin Diesel has his 3 sidekicks. The one guy, the other guy, and Jesse. Oh, I love Jesse. We're gonna get to it, but I love Jesse. But one of his henchmen apparently is like into Mia, which I didn't understand until I was listening to the Guilty Pleasures podcast that I was just talking about after I watched the movie. I didn't understand that at all. I didn't understand that it was like sort of this guy and the cop fighting over the waitress. I thought maybe this guy was just already with her, or that was her brother. It was not clear what the relationship between everybody was. But they all start fighting outside of this diner. They casually drop the F slur, which already was just like, okay, that's already, people could say it's 2001, it was still a homophobic slur in 2001, but then I never understood what, like, the motive behind the main guy was until it was explained that he was a cop. Like, before it was just sort of like, okay, so he likes this waitress girl, maybe, and then he works at this car shop, maybe, and then he's going to this drag race, not the cool, fun one, the car racing one, where he is trying to, like, beat Vin Diesel in a street race, but you don't understand what any of this is for. He wants to be, like, respected by him, but, like, you don't understand why, because you don't understand what he means. It's, like, sort of, like, you talk to these other characters, and then you get the idea that, like, Vin Diesel is, like, the head of, like, the street gang world, but, like, you don't understand the significance of that. Like, why do we care? What does this have to do with, like, the plot? What is going on? Because you don't understand the central conflict until, like, you are introduced to the fact that he is a cop, which doesn't happen until, like, 30-45 minutes into the movie. So the whole beginning part of the movie, I had no idea what was going on. Like, why are we here? Why are we trying to earn his respect? Like, who is this guy? But the cop races Vin Diesel and loses, obviously. In, like, this stupid, like, dick measuring contest where, like, the cop tries to put NOS in his car and it doesn't really work, and so he has to give his car over to Vin Diesel, and then he, like, opens the hood and is like, you're gonna burn out your blah-blah-blah, you're an idiot, you shouldn't have done all this, because anybody who knows anything about cars knows the NOS and the fuel pipes, and then everyone around him just laughs. Did not understand a single word of that, because it didn't make any sense. It was very specific, again, car lingo that's just sort of, like, assume that the audience understands. So again, maybe this is a big, just, like, general knowledge pool in straight male culture, and therefore I just don't get it. But it was just so very confusing, because it was very clear that everybody in that room in the movie just, like, understood this lingo, and it was sort of understood that as the audience you were in on the joke, and I was like, I am very much not in on the joke. But then they're all at the end of the street gang, they hear the cops are coming to, like, bust down the party, and, like, 2 million cars just, like, start driving away off that street. And then Vin Diesel, like, drives his car into a parking garage, gets out, and starts walking on the street for some reason, even though there are still cops out looking for him. One of the cops spots him and he has to run off. Why he didn't just stay in the parking garage and wait out the cops, I do not know. Does that car ever come back? No, it does not. Or if it does, I didn't notice it, because I was very much waiting for him to go back into the parking garage and, like, get his car. But that doesn't ever seem to happen, because at the end of the end of the movie, he's driving his dad's car. It's never really explained why he couldn't go back and get his car that he just left in the parking garage. Apparently that doesn't matter, though. But while Vin Diesel's running from the cops, the cop, the main white boy, rolls up in his green car and is like, here, I'm here to help you, get in the car, we'll outrun the cops. They start doing that. Vin Diesel feels very, like, indebted, because all of his 3 goons didn't come and save him. They were at a house party that we'll get to later. But then here we introduce a plot element that just feels, like, coded in racism, and I don't understand why it was a part of the plot at all, if not to set up for maybe one of the later movies, even though... Let me just explain what happens before I get into it. Okay, so they're driving away. Apparently they drive to the wrong area of town, maybe, and they get stopped by this biker gang who all just so happen to be Asian. And then we introduce the villain of the story, Johnny Tran. Now, you may be asking yourself, Sam, if there's already this big conflict between street racer Vin Diesel and undercover cop white boy, why do we need a villain? I wish I knew, bestie. I wish I knew. I wish I knew why we needed a whole separate plot of a villain who, like, doesn't add literally anything to the story when we already have a central conflict. I think all it does is muddy the story and completely make any sort of following any sort of plot line impossible. So I don't understand the point of introducing Johnny into the story unless it's sort of setting up for him to be a bigger villain in the later stories, because he doesn't die at the end of this. Or he does. Never mind. He does. I don't understand the point of that at all. Maybe somebody else in his street gang is going to come back in a later movie and take revenge after killing their boss. But, like, you shouldn't be watching this movie with the assumption that there's going to be another movie you have to follow up the plotline with. You know? It's a movie, not a TV show. Johnny literally adds nothing to the story. Let me explain to you Johnny's plotline and what we see him do very quickly. Johnny is there. He stops Vin Diesel because he's like, you're driving on the wrong side of town. This is our turf. And then they shoot up the cop's car. And then he doesn't do anything. The cop is trying to figure out who's doing all of these, like, truck hijacks. Which, by the way, they're hijacking DVD players. That's not even my issue with the story. The fact that they're stealing $6 million worth of DVD players is not my issue with the story. Even though that doesn't make any sense either. But the cop is like snooping around different people's like garages trying to see like who has like the car that they found that is like making these heists. So he's checking like the type of cars that these people have in their garages and like their tire treads and whatever. And he goes to Johnny Tran's like garage area and sees that they have a bunch of like DVD players in the corner. So he sends like a SWAT raid to Johnny's house, which is honestly just like really upsetting to watch. Maybe it's because of all the recent Asian hate crimes. Maybe it's because I'm Asian myself. But just like sort of seeing all the cops like break into these very like wholesome Asian places, because like there's Johnny who gets arrested at his house in the middle of a dinner with his family, and then his henchman who gets arrested at a Chinese restaurant or an Asian restaurant. It's not specifically Chinese, but I do think everything is about me. And it's just sort of really upsetting to see, and it's just sort of like not touched on that. It's not like it's like they're trying to like humanize them by showing them in like normal everyday settings, which just sort of also continues to muddy the water, because it's not like, oh, he's a bad guy, he's a villain, what he's doing is wrong. It's like, oh, he's a person. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of movies in which you walk away upset, and that is very much how I felt leaving this movie. But that's the second time we see Johnny, and then the third time is at like in the third act, which they're all going to the middle of the desert to basically do like a fire festival drag race. And Johnny is there. He beats Jesse in a drag race in which Jesse bet his dad's car. And I haven't even got to Jesse yet. Oh, my favorite character. And then Johnny gets all up in Vin Diesel's face being like, there was a SWAT raid at my house thinking that I did all these hijackings and I know it's your fault, I know that you ratted me out. And then Vin Diesel gets really mad and he's like, I never ratted out nobody. And then Johnny gets beat up, and then at the end of the movie there's a drive-by shooting where him and his henchmen kill Jesse, and I'll get to that in a little bit. And then the cop chases down Johnny and his henchmen and kills them. And that is the only impact that Johnny and his gang have on the story. So it was truly unnecessary to put him in this movie. And why did they have to be Asian? I've heard that, you know, they really tried to make this a really strong POC type of cast because, you know, the underground street racing world does not really have white people, which, you know, I guess make it authentic. Sure. But also, like, there was no point in having another set of villains at all. Like, Johnny and his gang didn't add anything to the story. Because, okay, you could say, oh, well, they had that red herring in order to, like, increase the tension between trying to figure out who's doing all the hijackings. But we already have Hector, who we've also introduced in the story. So, like, we could have just had it be him, or we could have not introduced Hector at all, because Hector's a whole nother person who we have to remember now, who also didn't add anything to the plot, except to maybe do other red herrings, because Hector was ordering things for 3 Honda Civics, and Honda Civics are the car that they're looking for that's doing the hijacking, so, like, he was, like, another red herring, and you could have just, like, combined the red herrings. We didn't have to have 2 separate ones. It didn't add anything to the plot, and I did not like seeing Asians be villainized in this movie. So I didn't like that. It didn't add anything to the plot. Especially since it was clear that, like, there was a lot of history between Vin Diesel and the Asian biker gang. That's also never explained in this movie. Maybe it's explained in the later movies, but again, you shouldn't have to watch the later movies to understand this one first movie. Okay? But enough of that. I don't understand what they're doing in the story, and I don't think that they were necessary whatsoever. But, rolling it back a little bit, the cop gets his car shot up, and then he goes to this house party with Vin Diesel and all of his crew. And Vin sort of talks to his crew about how I do trust this guy, because he was there for me, and none of you guys were there for me. and blah, 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 blah. The cop has a conversation with Vin Diesel's sister where she finally explains that that is her brother and that that is their relationship. And then Vin Diesel has maybe a girlfriend in this. I still don't really understand the relationship. It's like they're together, but also he was with, like, he had his arm around other girls at that first drag race, and then she got really jealous. I don't understand their relationship at all. Also, she's not given any real speaking lines, so I don't know her name. This movie also does not pass the Bechdel test, which, you know, maybe I'm just expecting too much out of Fast and Furious 2001, but, you know, I just wish it was, like, a little more cohesive. Like, I can appreciate and understand, like, an offensive or bad or in bad taste movie if it's good and, like, makes sense. But this movie was, like, offensive, and it also didn't make any sense. So, like, that's a bit too far for me. The cop talks to Vin Diesel's sister. They have a conversation where they flirt a bit more and sort of, like, expand upon their relationship or whatever, and then he goes home, and then not until after this party do we learn he is a cop. So we had all of that beginning part in which I had no idea what his motive was, why he's here, what he's about, what the whole conflict of the story was, until maybe about 45 minutes in. Which is not good storytelling in my opinion, but go off, I guess. Where he gets fake arrested and he gets brought into this house where he's, like, talking to the FBI who he's working with, and he's, like, talks about how he refuses to believe that Vin Diesel is the one doing all of these hijackings. And only now, in this point of the story, do we understand that that is what's going on, is that in that first scene, they were hijacking DVD players, and that apparently the truckers who are driving them are getting really angry about being hijacked for some reason. I don't know how that has anything to do with the driver, but they get really mad about it, and it comes to a head at the end of the movie, but we'll get to it then. Then after this, we have a few more conversations between Vin Diesel and the cop, where they just sort of build their relationship, but also not really well. The cop gets together with Vin Diesel's sister, which is a whole big thing apparently. I just don't think that any of the relationships are developed in any sort of clear or well done fashion, which sort of hurts the whole ending of the movie that we'll get to, but also because apparently the whole franchise is about, like, family and how you don't turn your back on your family and how the crew is your family, that I didn't get any of that in this first movie. It's a lot of that. And I just think that, like, the pacing of the movie is also really weird, and how nothing really happens for any, like, reason. Like, there's no sequence of events, there's no chain of events that makes any sort of sense, because, like, there's a scene where the cop is talking to his other cop friends, and he's like, I don't believe that Vin Diesel would ever do this. He couldn't do this. He's too, like, controlled and meticulous or whatever. And then one of the other cops is like, you know, he, like, beat a guy up, and he went to prison because he beat a guy up or whatever, which is supposed to, like, sow doubt into this idea that he has that, like, Vin Diesel could never do this. But then literally in the next scene, with no prompting whatsoever, because it's just Vin Diesel and the cop, like, working on this car or whatever, and then Vin Diesel, out of the blue, is like, let me go show you something. And then he shows him his dad's car, and then goes into this whole monologue about why he beat this guy up, because, like, his dad was also a racer, and this car went and, like, bumped him off, and then Vin Diesel's dad's, like, flips out, and, like, his car, like, explodes, and, like, him as, like, a child had to watch his dad burn alive. Really traumatic stuff. Never really touch on it ever again. But then he talks about how, like, the guy who, like, bumped his dad off the road, he went and he, like, beat that guy up in, like, a fit of rage. Which is then supposed to just sort of, like, nullify the idea that Vin Diesel's a bad person, and that, oh, well, you know, there was all this doubt that maybe he was kind of evil, but, like, he did it because he was, like, upset about his family. So, one, the whole, like, tension, any sort of tension that could have been built by this, like, conflict of knowledge is completely ruined in the next scene. And also, the next scene comes completely unprompted. Like, it's just very, like, coincidental. It's very convenient that in the very next scene, out of the blue, he just wants to share this very deep piece of trauma that just so happens to, like, clear his name. It's very weird and not well written. But sidestepping from their love story for a second, let's talk about Jesse. Jesse, who's my favorite character ever. Jesse is one of Vin Diesel's crew. He's like the smart, nerdy, techie guy. He works on the engines and on all of the models and whatever. And he's sort of like the brains of the operation. But he has a whole conversation with the cop where he's just sort of like showing him all the models, and the cop is like, wow, you're so smart, you could be at MIT. And the guy was like, no, I can't focus that long. I was always really good at math and science or whatever, but I just can't really focus in school because I have ADHD. I'm obviously not a psychologist, but in my mind, Jesse seems to be more autistic than ADHD, even though I know there's a lot of overlap about that. But I was talking to my friend who was also watching it with me, and she also said that she felt he was more autistic coded than ADHD, but like, not the point. Point is, he is supposed to be neurodivergent. So, already a big fan of him as sort of just like the nerd who is also just, a little bit socially awkward. Just sort of my favorite character type. But everybody goes down to like this fire festival sort of thing where they're all doing these giant drag races for like money and for pink slips and whatever. And then Jesse is like, because he's like installed Nas in his car, he believes he could beat Johnny Tran in a race, and he bets his dad's car. Which we never really explain why his dad has this really nice car and what like the tension between him and his dad is, because when he loses the race against Johnny, he's really freaked out about it because he's worried about what his dad's going to say, because like I guess in like an overarching generic sense you don't want to like lose something of your parents, but like it feels like there's more there that's never really explained. So Jesse sort of freaks out and then, like, runs off with the car. Like, he drives off, and we don't see him again until the very, very end of the movie, in which after this big boss fight happens, the cop goes to confront Vin Diesel at his house. And he's there with his sister, and his sister's like, it's all over, just give yourself up. And Vin's like, no, I have to go find Jesse because Jesse's still missing. He missed the whole big boss battle because Jesse was just gone and written out the story because there's too many fucking characters to juggle. But convenient, again, very convenient. Just at that moment, Jesse drives up in his car and is like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm so freaked out. And then Vin looks very relieved to see him, and then as Jesse's walking to the house, Johnny and his henchmen on their motorcycles come driving up the street. And I just knew, and I said it out loud. I was like, oh my god, it's a drive-by shooting. If they shoot Jesse, I'm going to cry. And guess exactly what happens. They drive by and they shoot Jesse, and I did in fact cry. Again, I don't like movies that make me upset. The world is upsetting enough. Why did you make me invest 90 minutes of my life to continue to be sad? I did not enjoy that. But then they just shoot Jesse. He's sort of lying on the street, and then Vin and the cop go after them, and we never see Jesse again. So, cool. I just thought that was really unnecessary, because, like, Jesse was also, like, never in the story. He was in, like, a few of the group scenes, but, like, those two scenes that I just told you about, the one where he's talking to the cop and the one where he loses the drag race, are the only real scenes in which you see Jesse right before he gets murdered. So, like, why? Maybe I'm very biased because I really like Jesse as a character. Maybe that was the whole point, that you were supposed to, like, feel for this character who you kind of liked, but you also, like, did not know him because he was not really in the movie. But that just seemed, again, stupid and unnecessary. But let's get to the whole boss moment, this whole boss battle at the end of the third act. The FBI keeps trying to push the cop to be like, it's Vin Diesel. Okay, he is the one who's doing the hijacking and you need to get to the bottom of it. So the cop goes to have like brunch or something with Vin Diesel, and he's like, I need more money. I know that you have some sort of underground sort of business and I want in on it. And then Vin's like, okay, if you win a race at this big fire festival thing, then we can talk. But in the middle of the fire festival, right after Jesse goes and runs off, Vin and his crew all, like, head off in the middle of the night, and the cop sees him. He tries to talk to Vin's sister and is like, yo, what are they doing? And she doesn't want to tell him because obviously, like, this is illegal and they want to keep it secret. So then he has to, like, blow his cover and be like, I'm a cop. And he's going to get in big trouble if he doesn't stop this, because apparently all of the truckers are, like, really upset that they're being hijacked, so they're arming themselves with shotguns. So he has to, like, blow his cover, which is supposed to be, like, this big moment. But, like, I honestly did not understand why he had to do that. Because I guess he needed, like, Vin Diesel's phone number from his sister to, like, run a trace on it. But he could have easily just have asked her or have gotten his phone number previous to this moment to then run a trace on it on his own and not had to have, like, blown his cover. I get why he has to do it in the end. But in this moment, it didn't really seem important. I guess it was supposed to be, like, this big, impactful moment because it's sort of, like, the twist of the story. But, like, I guess I just truly didn't care. Because in my mind, none of these relationships seem significant. Like, this happens over the course of, like, a few days, like, a week at most. And, like, none of their relationships feel important enough for this to be, like, a big sort of betrayal. They go after him. And in the middle of this big, like, hijacking mission, the, like, truck driver takes out a shotgun and starts, like, shooting at them. Even when they're, like, trying to retreat, which doesn't make any sense because I'm like, at some point, self-defense has to, like, stop, right? Like, sure, you can be like, oh, well, they were jacking my truck, which also just, like, doesn't make any sense that you would be so invested in these items that, like, aren't yours that you would want to kill a man. But once they were trying to, like, retreat and, like, be like, oh, this guy's trying to kill us, maybe we should leave, he continues to shoot at them. Which I'm like, okay, at some point, you know, attempted robbery and like, first-degree murder are, you know, not equal. You know, you can't claim self-defense at that point. But that's all I can think of going through this big fight scene. I guess it added more tension because, like, it's like Vin Diesel and his girlfriend and his third guy, his other henchman, are all trying to, like, drive alongside this truck. One of the guys, like, jumps onto it and is, like, using, like, this grappling hook sort of thing, and then the truck driver starts shooting at him, and then this guy is trying to, like, climb back down, but his arm gets, like, tangled in the grappling hook wire, so he can't really get off, and, like, it's this big moment. Vin Diesel's girlfriend, like, flips over, and then Vin Diesel's the only one there trying to get him untied, and the cop has to come by and save him. It's a whole thing. I'm not explaining this well, but it's not a good movie, so I don't think it's my fault. But while all this is happening, and this guy is trying to, like, pull this guy free from this wire that's, like, fully fucking up his arm, the truck driver's still shooting at them. I'm like, chill, bro. It's not even your stuff. Like, I don't know. Just seemed a little bit ridiculous to me. But after all this happens, he gets the guy free from the grappling hook wire that's fully fucked up his arm. They're laying him out, like, on the grass, and then the guy is like, we have 10 minutes to get him to a hospital or he's going to die. So the cop has to, like, blow his cover, call, and be like, I'm officer blah, 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 blah. It was something Irish, wasn't it? O'Mulligan. I don't really remember. And I need a dispatch here right now. There's a man, he's bleeding out. And, like, that's a good moment. That right there is a good moment where, like, you can see the betrayal in Vin Diesel's eyes, because Vin Diesel really truly vouched for him. His other crew members wanted to be like, this guy's so a cop, because when the cop was, like, snooping around people's, like, garages trying to see who was the one with the car that was doing the hijacking, he gets caught by one of the members of Vin Diesel's crew, and Vin Diesel has to, like, interrogate him and be like, what are you doing? And the cop comes up with this lie to be like, oh, I'm just trying to, like, get an edge up on the competition, but the crew is like, no, this guy's a cop, because he was. But Vin Diesel, like, fully vouched for him and fully believed that he could trust him. So, like, this moment of betrayal was good. The moment with his sister was unnecessary, especially since it didn't do anything to, like, change the relationship as far as we could see in this first movie, because when he sees her again at the house in which she's confronting Vin Diesel, she doesn't really say anything to him. It doesn't seem like she feels very betrayed, and she continues to help him once she's found out that he is a cop and has been lying to them. I feel like it would have been a way bigger, like, moment if he only reveals this to Vin Diesel, and then when Vin Diesel gets back to the house, then he tells his sister, so that they're both sort of mad at him when he gets to the house in, like, the final scene. I think that would have been a way bigger, like, moment of, like, tension and conflict, but, like, I don't know. I wasn't a screenwriter in 2001, so I guess it's not up to me. At the end of this movie, after the cop goes to confront Vin Diesel, they go and chase down Johnny Tran and his crew. Vin Diesel goes and he races off. The cop has to follow him because that's what cops do, I guess. And then they both get stopped at a red light. And then for some reason, the cop doesn't do anything. He doesn't go and try to arrest him or stop him. And then Vin Diesel gets to go on this whole, like, monologue about how the train tracks at the very end are a quarter mile. And I used to race down here a lot. So that's basically implied that when the light goes green, they're going to try to race down to the train tracks. For some reason. I don't understand why they had to do this and why the cop didn't just arrest him. I guess this is maybe continuing the conflict about him believing that Vin Diesel can't be a bad person and that they're friends now, blah, 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 blah. But then they race, and then, you see that a train is coming, so it's supposed to be, like, this really intense, like, chase scene where they almost get hit by the train, and then they don't, and then they stop, and then, Vin Diesel, like, spins out a little bit, and he crashes, and then the cop helps pull him out of the car, and then he hears that the cops are coming. And then, instead of, like, letting him get captured and turning him in, the cop gives his car keys to Vin Diesel. Because he owes him, like, a 10-second car, because, when, at the very beginning of this movie, when he lost the race to Vin Diesel, he said he would give him his car, but then when they were driving away, his car got shot up by the biker gang, so he still owes him a 10-second car. Still have no idea what the fuck 10-second car means. It was never explained. It was just sort of assumed that we all understood. Apparently, I only learned this after watching the movie, a 10-second car means that your car could travel a quarter of a mile in around 10 seconds. Never explained. Never explained. So he gives the car to Vin Diesel so that he can escape, and he lets him go. Again, not clear why he did this. I guess because they're friends and the power of friendship and family, but also doesn't make any sense. But that's the movie, basically. That's all, like, the big plot points that happen. It's not a good movie. I don't think it's a good movie. I don't think any of it made any sense. There are too many characters. I haven't even talked about all of the characters. That's how many characters there are. There is Johnny Tran, his sidekick, his whole crew, Vin Diesel, his girlfriend, his sister, his 3 henchmen, Hector, his couple buddies. There's also this guy who is part of the first street race, who talks to some girls, and the girls are like, if you win, you get to sleep with me and my friend, because we love objectifying women. But then he doesn't win, and then that's a whole mini scene. So there's that guy, and then there's a third guy, or a 10,000th guy, who races against Vin Diesel's girlfriend in the Fire Festival drag race, who loses against her. So there's just a lot of characters and a lot going on, and I feel like if we just cut, like, 25% of the extra characters, we could have devoted a lot more time to developing these relationships so that the endings have some more weight. Because they don't mean anything when the movie is just, like, a lot of, street racing, which is, like, cool, and I get, like, the point of the movie was, like, street racing, fast, furious, but, like, if you want it to make sense and you want it to be emotionally impactful when he betrays them, you need to devote time to developing the relationships, and they don't do that. It is also never explained how much money they're betting. I think they once mentioned at the beginning that the buy-in for the first street race was $2,000, but every time thereafter, a character just sort of shows, like, a wad of cash, and it's sort of understood between all of the people in the scene that they're all holding the same amount of money. But it's never discussed how much money that is. So I guess we're supposed to assume that it's $2,000 across the board. But, like, wouldn't you also think that, like, different street races have different levels of buy-in? That, like, one casual street race in California would not be the same as this bigger street race in the desert. That's what I would think. That the level of money should change based on how high or how difficult the competition is. But it's never discussed how much money that they're holding. Small thing, but I didn't like it. I don't like not understanding things. I like to be able to understand things. I like when I can, I get it. I didn't feel that way at all throughout this movie. So now that I'm done talking about how much I didn't like that movie, let me talk about what I would have done differently. Because I know that, like, I could have just written a better movie. I've already talked about a few of the things. There would be no Hector. Hector is out of the story. I think also Johnny Tran and his whole street gang are out of the story, because we already have the conflict between the cop and Vin Diesel's buddy, who's into his sister. So we already have that conflict from the beginning of the story. So he can already be an antagonist to the cop, and it would create a lot better sort of social dynamic, or like character conflict, because he's already within the group and he's going sort of against what the leader is thinking. So I just think that would be a way more interesting thing than just sort of having these outsiders that we never really see. So Johnny and his gang are out. Hector is out. You might be thinking, oh, but like, we need them for the other... I don't care about the other movies. I don't care about the other movies. This is a standalone movie. It's the first movie. In fact, it should just be able to be watched on its own. And another thing that I didn't really understand throughout this movie is that I never had any inclination that it was Vin Diesel behind all of these hijackings, because we never get any hint of that. It's just sort of assumed because he's like the big bad street racer guy and all of the FBI just believes that it's him, that we're supposed to believe that it's him. But like, we also went along the story of getting to know him through the eyes of the cop. Therefore, I did not believe that it was him, like, at all. There was nothing to allude to that. There were no, like, scenes where you could, like, see something in the hijacking and it show up in a scene with Vin Diesel. Like, there were no connections between the scene. It was just sort of implied and assumed. So, like, I didn't follow that assumption because I didn't have any reason to believe that. I thought maybe it was like, his crew is working against him on the side. Like, his crew is doing this, but he is kept out of the loop because they know that, like, he wouldn't approve of it. I thought that that's what was happening. Apparently it's not. Apparently it just is Vin Diesel. So I thought it would be a much better idea, especially if we're going with the theme of family, that he is going to be betrayed by his entire crew in this final moment. So instead of it being Vin Diesel and all of his crew doing this, it's just his 3 sidekicks, which means that Jesse doesn't die, because I don't like that. So it's Jesse, the other guy, the third guy, and his girlfriend and his sister, like, know about it, but they're not, like, in it. Okay, they're not, like, helping them, but they are, like, knowledgeable of the things, and they choose not to tell Vin Diesel. So drama on top of that, because the cop has this moment where he says, like, I need to find out his name, because I can't just be calling him the guy and the other guy. There's Jesse, the hothead, and then the extra. That's what we're going to call them. You got it? We're on the same page? Okay. Where the cop is talking about how he thinks that the hothead would do it, but he's too stupid to do it. Therefore, he should be working with Jesse, the smart guy, so that they're, the brain and the brawn working together. Then they have their third extra friend, just to sort of help. But they are truly the 2 masterminds behind it. And then there's still 3 of them for the 3 Honda Civics. Very little has to change for this plot to be stronger and make more sense. So here's what I'm thinking. The beginning of the movie is just a lot better. There's a lot more exposition. That's what I want. I want some exposition. There was no exposition. It was just sort of dropping you into the story with no explanation. So there is some exposition. Like in the first scene in which we're watching the cars, like, drive around and hijack the truck, we see I don't know, something hanging from the rearview mirror or something, and then we see that later come up in the garage in one of the other cars and when they're showing the cop around. So you could be like, oh my god, I saw that in the beginning, so we know that it's them. We need just hints. We need, like, breadcrumbs that lead to the big reveal, because I don't understand how we're supposed to figure out that it was Vin Diesel other than they were just directly telling us. And even then, there were previous red herrings in the story, so I don't know why we were supposed to, like, just believe the FBI. It was just stupid, and it didn't make any sense. So, we're going to leave breadcrumbs to make this a big reveal, okay? So we have that in the first scene. We'll keep the second scene the same, except maybe we'll explain a bit more. Like, Vin Diesel will do a bit more exposition in his monologue. Like, when he's kicking the cop out, he's like, you work at Harry's, right? And he's like, well, this is my crew. Okay. me and my girl and my sister and all of my homies, we own this block, or something like that. I don't really care. Just a bit of an explanation to be like, oh, this is the relationship between all the characters, because it is not explained ever. And you gotta get out of here, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so we had that moment. There was also no reason he had to work at Harry's. I guess it was like a cover for him being a cop, but also just a bit confusing. I don't want him to have a cover story. I think it's stupid, and I think it's unnecessary. It doesn't really add anything to the plot, except for that one moment in which he buys the parts for Hector. But Hector's not even in the story anymore, so we don't need him to have a cover story. He's just like, he's just a criminal. That's his cover story. He's a criminal like everybody else, so he doesn't need to have a cover story. He is just an undercover cop, undercover as a criminal. So instead of him having to go to Harry's after that scene, he goes and he talks to his cop people, and that's when we learn that he's an undercover cop, so that it's quick and in the beginning of the story, so that we understand what's going on. I would actually prefer that we get introduced to him going undercover before we get that scene where he meets the crew and his sister. Because when we're already dropped to the story, it's like 2 weeks into his undercover plot where he's like going and talking to her, the waitress girl. So maybe he's like briefing the FBI and his team and whatever, and then he goes and sits down at the diner place, so that we already know who he is and what his motives is going into that scene. I would prefer it that way. I will accept it if the scene has to go after, but whatever. So he's no longer undercover as like a mechanic or whatever, because that's stupid. He's just a criminal. So the street race is going to go exactly the same, except in the street race, his car like completely gets like all of his motors or engine or whatever, because he did the NOS too early, completely like fried his system. So he can't drive that car anymore, but he did bet the car to Vin Diesel, so he still owes him a car. There we go. Perfect. Or no, he needs it for picking up Vin Diesel. Okay, so the cops scatter them off. He goes and he picks up Vin Diesel. And then, because his car is already sort of like struggling from that bad race that he just had, that when he picks up Vin Diesel has some sort of like one-liner like, wow, I can't believe this thing is still running. And then as they're like driving off to like hide from the cops, they hide in like an alley or a parking garage or somewhere, I don't care. But he stops the car, and they wait for like the police to drive by, so that they're like, okay, we're in the clear. And then they try to start up the car again, the car won't start. That's how the car gets fucked, so that we don't need to introduce Johnny Street Gang into this. And then Vin has some sort of quippy one-liner about how you gotta know your bolts from your springs. I don't know, something about cars. And then they walk the rest of the way to Vin's house and their house party. There we go. Perfect. Bada bing, bada boom. And then maybe we get to watch them like walk down the street and they talk a little bit on the way there. Some sort of bonding moment about being like, how'd you know where to find me? Why do you care about picking me up? And the guy's like, well, I want some respect, and blah, 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 blah. And just some sort of bonding moments. Maybe they talk about cars. I really don't care. But they bond on the walk to his house. And then when Vin gets there, they have a whole... Oh, they have to take a taxi. They have to take a taxi anyways. Okay, they call a taxi. Right, I forgot that they had to call a taxi. They call, okay, a taxi, yeah, because a taxi pulls them up to his house. Okay, so then we have them in the taxi. All the time that we took for Johnny's Street Gang moment, the car won't start, they call up a taxi, they're in the taxi, it's a shot of them talking in the taxi. And they have to talk in like funny code lingo because they don't want to give away to the taxi driver like that they're criminals. That would be, yeah, there we go. There we go. See, we're writing this together on the fly. Can you see I prepared for this video? Not at all. And yet I've been talking for an hour. It is a skill. Yeah, maybe then we could explain the character dynamics a little bit more. Like the cop or the taxi driver's like, so how you two doing? How's your night going? Blah, 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 blah. You have a girlfriend? And then Vin Diesel explains that yes, he has a girlfriend. And maybe then we get to see a little bit of insight into the relationship. Because at the street race, he has this moment where he's sort of just like Like, he has his arm around other girls, but it's not really clear whether or not he's, like, cheating. In my mind, flirting isn't cheating, but, like, every relationship has their own boundaries, and you have to respect your partner, blah, 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 blah. So maybe he has a moment where he's talking to the taxi driver about how he's like, yeah, and I love her, and I love her so much, you know? I have an eye out for the ladies, but she's my number one, or something like that. Something slightly misogynistic. We have a moment where he explains sort of like his relationship to his girlfriend, maybe to his sister, maybe to the cop. Just a little bit of like character building, dynamic bonding, something like that, just so that we understand their characters a bit more. Then we get to the house party. Vin Diesel chews out his whole crew for not being there for him. That scene basically goes the same. And then, I don't really remember all of these middle scenes between the big plot moments, but basically it's all going to generally go the same, except for in these red herring moments, we're going to be building up the idea that Vin Diesel's crew is working against him. And we still have that dinner scene where they're all eating together as a family, and that guy storms off, but then he comes back because they all eat together because they're a family. And in that scene, we develop some more like family dynamics. We show that they all sort of are together and they lean on each other, even though they are, in a sense, betraying Vin Diesel by doing this illegal thing outside of his knowledge. But I do want the cop to be kept out of the dark in this, because I want him to continue to try to follow around Vin Diesel and think that he's the leader and sort of continue to get closer to him. And in those moments, he is blind to what the rest of the crew is doing behind their backs. So, like, in the moment where Vin Diesel, for some reason, wants to go and divulge his whole life trauma to him, we see them do that scene, and then we cut to the rest of the crew still around the car, talking about their next hit against the truck that we'll see later in the movie, but without Vin Diesel. So then, at that point, we have established that they are the ones doing the heists. And, it really starts building the tension from there that they are betraying Vin Diesel in this fashion. There's a lot of conflicting moments in the scenes because they don't trust this guy who they think is a cop, who is a cop. And then maybe in a scene where the hothead storms off, Jesse goes after him, and they talk about how they just need to hit one more truck. And they're like, I can't believe that Vin would do this. I can't believe we thought about bringing him into this. And Jesse's like, we can't trust him, man. Look at that guy. That guy's obviously a narc, and blah, 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 blah. Just a lot of that. I want basically those two parallel storylines of the hothead and Jesse and the third guy sort of working in tandem, but also against Vin Diesel and the cop. And that all comes to a head at the Fire Festival drag race. Also, I think a really good motive for, like, this betrayal, like, why do they even want to go against Vin Diesel in the first place, is the whole, one, no honor among thieves, sort of, everybody has to look out for themselves, but also, we have to keep in mind that Vin Diesel's crew is half made up of people that he's, like, very closely related to. It's him, his sister, his girlfriend, and then the three other guys who are just, like, his friends, and I want them all to be very aware that if, like, something comes down, like the cops are after them, he's going to choose his sister and his girlfriend over the three of them. So I think that would be a really good point of conflict, but I think that also gives us the opportunity to talk about chosen versus given family and how that plays into this sort of criminal underworld and their, like, relationships between each other. Now, this ending part of how Vin Diesel finds out, I don't really have a set idea, but let me just talk it out with you. I'm thinking that maybe in the middle of the night, same thing as what happens in the movie. All of the guys except for Vin Diesel start heading off in the middle of the night, and then the cop notices it, is like, oh well, that's suspicious, that's weird, and because he's always sort of suspected them, he is like, well, I have to go after them, but he doesn't know where they're going. So then he goes and he talks to Vin Diesel. And Vin Diesel's like, wait, where are they going? What's going on? Because he is, again, kept out of the loop. And the two of them decide to go off and follow the rest of his crew to sort of see what they're doing. I think it would be a good moment if the cop continues to try to keep up this lie because they don't really know how to follow him, but they can get like a cell phone trace. And Vin Diesel goes to like one of Jesse's laptops and is like, I'm sure I could figure this out and try to like figure out how to track them through there. And then while Vin Diesel's off trying to like figure out the computer, the cop goes and does a secret phone call to run a trace on like Jesse or the hothead or one of their phones. And then he gets a location off of his phone and he pulls it up maybe in like a text message or something. And then Vin Diesel's like, whoa, how did you do that? And the cop's like, been spending too much time around Jesse, I guess. And he like sort of continues the lie. So he's lying truly up into the very final second because he doesn't want to blow his cover. I don't know why he was so nonchalant about blowing his cover. Like, a cop, if in the middle of that illegal street festival, they will kill you. Like, he was just very nonchalant about blowing his cover. He should have been way more protective about that, but like, in my movie, he is. So then they go and they chase after him, and we see them trying to hijack the truck. It goes similarly bad as it did in the movie. And then Vin Diesel and the cop are there, and they help them, like, get untangled from the truck, and then they all pull off to the side of the road. And then Vin Diesel, like, blows up at them, and he's like, I can't believe you do this. Behind my back, you put me and my girl and my sister in danger. I can't believe this. You are out. And, like, a whole blah, 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 blah. And in the background, you hear the cop trying to tend to the hothead whose arm is all fucked up, and he's like, guys, or he's screaming his name, whatever his name is. He's like slapping his face, trying to like get him to stay conscious. And then they all like turn to him and then like notice that he's bleeding out. And they're like, oh my God, dude, this isn't good. And he's like, what are we gonna do? And then at that moment, that's the moment in which the cop decides to blow his cover. Because he's like, well, I have to call in an ambulance. I have to call in a helicopter. This guy's gonna die. And then that is like the second betrayal moment for Vin Diesel, because Vin Diesel's already just had this big betrayal moment against his whole crew, and then now he's being betrayed by this one guy who he thought he could trust. Double betrayal. And then Jesse and whatever the third guy is, they're like, oh my God, you're a cop. And then he said, I knew you were a rat. And then they try to like fight him, but then Vin Diesel is like, no, and he breaks up the fight again, similar to the beginning of the movie. Cinematic parallels. And then he's like, let's just go. We have to go. The cops are coming. We have to go. And then as they're running away, Vin Diesel takes one last look around over his shoulder to see the cop looking back at him, and then he gets in the car and he drives off. Very dramatic. I know. I love it. So nobody dies in this, because nobody needed to die in this. And then very similar to the end of the movie, except there's no, like, Jesse to die or Asian people to murder. As soon as he gets the hothead into the like, ambulance thing, he drives over to Vin Diesel's house, and he's like, where's Jesse and the other guy? He's like, they're long gone now. Can't have any rats sniffing around my place. And he says that very pointedly at the cop. And I'm pretty sure he has a gun in this scene or something. And then instead of him just trying to, run off and try to find Jesse, he's just like, I'm not going back to prison. Like he said in the beginning of the movie, he's doubling down on that idea that he doesn't want to go back to prison. Yeah, if he's not involved in, like, the big heist, why does he have to run away? I think we need to explain that, because even to me it's a bit confusing right now. Well, he says at the beginning, he gets stopped, like, by the cop at the beginning of the movie, where they see him walking down the street, so they know him by face, so he's like a wanted criminal. So maybe he has this conversation with the cop, because the cop, again, does not want to believe that he's a bad person. And he's like, I'm just here to talk, bro. You weren't involved in any of the hijacking shit. We don't need to take you in. He's like, you're a cop, man. And he blows up again at him, and he's just like, just because I wasn't jacking trucks doesn't mean I don't have warrants for my arrest or blah, 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 blah. The cops know me. They want me back there. Something about how he doesn't want to go back to prison. And then the cop even knows that this is true because he's had the other cop FBI people thinking that it's him and trying to go after him. So I'm sure that they could try to get him on something. Or maybe he just doesn't trust his crew. He's like, you think Hothead's not gonna try to rat me out the second that he wakes up, because he's probably in a coma in the hospital or something or whatever. It doesn't matter that I wasn't there with them. They got enough dirt on me to send me away, and I'm not going back to prison. There we go. That's a good one. Okay. Also, I think even a better reason why Vin Diesel has to go on the run is because he knows exactly where the rest of the guys are hiding. thing. And even though he's like feels fully betrayed by them, he still considers them family and doesn't want to turn them in. So I think that would be a good reason. Maybe that's not entirely clear to the cop. Maybe there was like a conversation. Maybe like, you know how in the movie it's the scene where the cop pulls up to the house and his sister and Vin Diesel are already there. Maybe the scene starts a bit earlier and it's his sister and him having a conversation about being like, well, they ran off to blah, 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 and I'm not going to turn them in. Like a conversation where like we as the audience know that he knows and his sister knows where they are, but they're choosing not to tell the cop. One, to save Vin Diesel for going to prison because he's like aiding and abetting a criminal, you know, that sort of thing, but also because he still considers them family and doesn't want to turn them in. So, all great themes to work with. The cop tries to stop him. He gets in the car. His sister's screaming out, like, on the porch side. She's like, Vin Diesel, no! And then he, like, hits the gas, almost hits the cop as he's driving away. And then the cop tries to, you know, shoot at him. None of the bullets hit him, of course. And he's like, fuck. And he gets in the car, and then he chases after him. And then they do the same thing, just like in the actual movie. But instead of trying to go after Johnny Tran, because there is no Johnny Tran, it's just a good old-fashioned car chase. Good old-fashioned car chase. And then they do the same thing where they get to the light, and then they try to race past it, and then he sees the cops coming, and he's like, and he gives him the car, and he's like, I owe you a 10-second car. Blah, blah. End of movie. I've done it. I've rewritten. I think my version is very good. I've done it, people. I've done it. You get the gist of the movie now? I think it's a lot better the way that I've written it. I think it's a lot tighter. I think there's a lot more emotional moments for bonding and then therefore betrayal. Because I think if you spend a lot more time, you know, developing the relationship between the characters, you're a lot more betrayed when it all falls through. So you still get that same sad ending, but it's just a lot less confusing. If you've seen Fast and Furious and understood it, let me know why. Is it because you already had a lot of car knowledge going into it? Because I think that really affected my viewing experience. What do you think of the way that I rewrote the movie? I think it's a lot better. What did you think? I did spend a lot of this movie talking about the reasons I didn't like Fast and Furious. Let me give you one thing that I really did like. I did like all of the car chase scenes. All of the actual street racing, all the times in which you get to see the cars, you know, like, driving real fast and doing really quick turns. I thought all of that was visually very interesting. Like, all of the editing and all of the, like, cinematography was very strong. That part of the movie was good. The rest of the movie, plot-wise, was weak. But I think we can do both. I think we can get the best of both worlds. So, let me know what you think about that. Maybe one day I'll watch the rest of the 8,000 movies and get to meet John Cena and The Rock. But only if we get some actual family bonding moments. I want to understand. I want to be a part of the familia.